Dala Nova Jebedra Nova Jebege Darbadan Tam Jekembe Baridu Chopra Jeba Tam Jekis Jebe Manangadan Yambe Senjen Tam Je Dewa Dang Den Dungyao Dang Den Dulana Me Bayang Dabra Sobe Chanju Rinpo Je Dobra Ja Dala Dhamma Jebe Dra Nopa Jebe Ge Turba Dan Tam Je Gembe Bardu Jobra Jeba Tam Je Ge Se Jebe Mananga Dang Nyampe Senjen Tam Je Dewa Dan Den Dunya Dan De Nudu Lana Mepa Yan Rabara Sobe Chanju Rinpo Je Tobra Ja Nala Dhava Jebe Dra Nobar Jebe Ke Tarbada Tam Je Gembe Bardu Jobra Jeba Tam Je Ges Jebe Manang Kadang Nyampe Senjen Tam Je Deva Dan Ten Tunyao Dan De Nerdu Lana Me Pa Yang Dabra Zobe Chanju Rinpo Je Tobar Je de sama geki bardu lunga yisum kewa lako mashi bardu lunga yisum kewa lako tu trine sunte ne ma chanta samki bardu lunga yisum kewa lako Sanje Chodan Soje Jonamla Chanjo Bardu Dane Gyamso Je Dage Jinso Gebe Sonamke Dola Pencher Sanje Dubrashu Sanje Chodan Soge Jonamla Chanjo Bardu Dane Gyamso Je Dage Jinso Gebe Sonamke Dola Pencher Sanje Dubrashu Sanje Chodan Soge Jonamla Chanjo Bardu Dane Gyamso Je Dage Jinso Gebe Sonam Ke Dola Pencher Sanje Drubrasho Manam Kadang Nyampe Senjen Tamje Dewa Dang Dewe Gindan Dampra Gyurje Dungyao Dang Dungyao Ji Gyudan Dewa Gyurje Dungyao Mepe Dewa Dang Me Dewa Gyurje Nering Chadang Nidang Dewe Tang Nyang La Nebra Gyurje Manang Kadang Nyampe Senchen Tamje Dewa Dang Dewe Gyudan Dampra Gyurje Dungyao Dang Dungyao Ji Gyudan Dewa Gyurje Dunga me pe te wa dang me zhe wa yu ju ni ring cha dang ni dang zhe wei tang niang la na pra ki ju ma nang ka dang niang pe sen chen tam che te wa dang de wei gyun dang den pra gyur ju du miao dang du miao yi gyur dang zhe wa gyur ju du miao me pe te wa dang me zhe wa gyur ju Niring chadang nidang zhawe dang niang la nebra kyu je. Please take a few moments to let body and mind to settle comfortably, quietly, contentedly, right here, right now. This quality of contentment, if we put some effort to bring it to the foreground of our experience, can go a long way in assisting in being less distracted. Most of the immediate energy related to distraction comes from habit. Yeah, habitually being distracted. That habit of distraction primarily arises because we are not contented. We think, we feel there's something more interesting, there's something better, there is some improvement that I can always do. As simple as my eyes thinking there's something more interesting to look at, just to that corner over there, or my skin feeling, oh, it's a little itchy, if only I scratch, down to all those kinds of not being contented. So now, instead of doing that, we bring out this quality of contentment that says, this is good enough. In all the worlds of the 10 directions reside Tathagatas of the 3 times before each of you, lions among humans, I prostrate joyfully with body, speech, and mind. By the power of this aspiration to noble deeds, all conquerors appear vividly in my mind. With as many bodies as there are atoms in all lands, I prostrate prostrate to all you conquerors in each atom of Buddhas, numberless as atoms, all in the midst of the heirs of the Buddhas. Thus I conceive of this Dharma Dhatu as completely filled with you conquerors in this way, with infinite oceans of praise and oceans of diverse melodies. I sing the excellent qualities of all you conquerors, and praise all of you gone to bliss with the best flowers and best garlands, best music, ointments and excellent parasols, our finest lamps and superior incense. I offer to you conquerors with excellent garments and best fragrances, and sandalwood powder heap high as Mount Meru, all wondrous offerings perfectly arranged. I offer to you, conquerors, these vast and unequal offerings to each and every one of you, conquerors, with the power of conviction in noble deeds. I prostrate and offer to all you conquerors all the harmful deeds that I have done with my body, speech, and mind under the power of desire, hatred, and ignorance. I confess each and every one of them. I rejoice in all the meritorious deeds of all conquerors in the 10 directions, and the heirs of the Buddha, solitary realizers, here is still in training and beyond, and all wandering beings, you who are lamps of the worlds of the 10 directions, who have unobstructedly attained Buddhahood through the stages of Bodhi, all you who are my protectors, please turn the unexhaled wheel of Dharma with palms together. I earnestly beseech you who may intend to manifest final nirvana, please remain for as many eons as there are atoms in the world, for the happiness and well-being of all wandering beings, whatever slight virtue that may have been gathered through prostrating, offering, confessing, rejoicing, requesting, and beseeching, I now dedicate to complete Bodhi. This ground sprinkled with scented waters and strewn with flowers, adorned with the supreme mountain, four continents, sun and moon, I hold in mind as a Buddha land and offer it. May all wandering beings experience such a pure land. To the Gurus who possess the three kayas, I offer the outer, inner, secret, and thusness offerings with my body, wealth, and all phenomenal existence. Please grant the unsurpassed supreme attainment, whatever slight virtue I may have gathered through prostrating, offering, confessing, rejoicing, requesting, and beseeching. I now dedicate it all to complete Bodhi. Om Guru Deva Dakinirana Mandala Pratitya Soha. Please turn the wheel of Dharma of the greater, lesser, and common vehicles in accordance with the dispositions and mental capacities of sentient beings. Ndurje chanzen tele naro dang mami dapo patu jiden kung kaden sunden cawe la mesha saju lama yidam chokyong la soba depso daji jinji lo kebrengi do me samlen gen rape don sunyong la kya zo me kya wadu je chang pa jiden kung po shabla do de tatu samgyo kyo le me jinji lo shi tu je jinen ge mung pa sen ne kyang sem to de do to pra jinji lo Hong Wajin Yajin Changsang Pema Geza Dompola Yasan Jogan Gondunya Pema June Sheshuda Guru Kando Mampo Kurke Jesse Da the Kajin Jiloji Shizu Guru Pema said Hong Men Jugin Yagin Podane to Sanji Kunjing on 1 year. Ransen Jogun on so don't say but Sawe La Meshabla so So let us see if there are questions from the last class. We went over, some of the broader kind of issues before we started to look into the specifics. So if there are any questions, please. No? Okay, very good. So we look at the text itself. Yeah, so we started with verse 1 and 2, which is the overview of this section in this chapter. Remember that this chapter has two sections. The first section is to take a closer look at this problem of distractions. Because distractions is what we are trying to overcome on the one hand, yeah. And on the other hand, therefore, distractions are also which impedes this samadhi that we're talking about here. So samadhi cannot be developed if we don't identify what stands in the way of samadhi. At the same time, samadhi is also. So when samadhi is present, then distractions is absent. So it's like looking at the issue or the task at hand from two perspectives, but two sides of the same coin. So the first side that we're going to look at is identifying the enemy, so to say, and then making a resolve to be free from that. So under then more specifically in this case, the samadhi that Shantideva focuses on here is not just any samadhi. In fact, there are many possibilities of what your mind is resting evenly in, what your mind is established evenly in. Here, he will focus on bodhicitta. These days, when teachings on bodhicitta, especially more popular versions of this, will paint a picture that is all just, pink and unicorns and cupcakes and, trees to hug, all those, really emotionally very sweet, very inspiring aspects of that. Yeah. But here, Shantideva says, if you don't, identify all the distractions, your heart and mind cannot really settle on bodhicitta. So the first half, the first 89 verses of this chapter, again, will bring out things that you don't normally hear so much when talking about bodhicitta. But this is really important, this other side that we need to attend to as well. Otherwise, all this talk on bodhicitta is just sentimentalism. Yeah, so let's now read verse 3 and 4. Here, Khenpo Kunpel says this 3 and 4, Shantideva begins by first talking about why we need to make a resolve to abandon, in the language that he used, to abandon worldliness, to abandon being tethered to samsara. And this is, I would argue, another way of putting it is how I was saying that we need to be content. It's when we're not content, right? Then we go looking for things. Then we get tethered, we get tied up and dragged around. Because of loved ones and desire for gain, we fail to turn away from worldly things. These then are the first things to renounce. The prudent should conduct themselves like this. Penetrative insight joined with calm abiding utterly eradicates afflicted states. Knowing this, first search for calm abiding, found by people who are happy to be free from worldly ties. So these are the two verses. Yeah. So in this verse 3, yeah, without holding back, Shantideva just says it. Now, of course, his audience are already monks, so he's just reminding them what they should already understand. Which apparently they understood, and therefore they have given up loved ones and desire for gain. Of course, in the kind of ideal picture that you paint, that tends to get painted. Why someone has become a monk or a nun is because they have seen the limitations of being attached to, entangled with loved ones and desire for gain. So one is much more concrete, right? Because of our loved ones. And the second is a little more abstract, we want to gain, we want to achieve this, we want to achieve that with regards to the world. So he says, because of these two things, then we become stuck and entangled in samsaric existence. The problem is not with who we love. Shantideva is not blaming them. Be clear here. And Shantideva is also not telling you to stop loving them. But Shantideva is saying that on the basis of because we love the people we love, and on the basis of us wanting to gain and not to lose. In that sense, right, these two things are quite, you can say, normal. Some might even argue biologically, it's part of the DNA. It's how we have evolved. Some might even argue that. I think insofar as that, Shantideva is not disagreeing with that, that these two are very normal. But what he's pointing out is, but because of these two things also, whatever these two situations, whatever good these two situations can bring, these two situations often also result in us, especially us who have taken the Bodhisattva vow, us who said that we want to walk on this path. It keeps us from understanding and seeing, right, the faults of still being caught up in the confusions of samsara, these worldly things. So then he says, therefore, these are the first things to renounce. So he says, renounce. Renounce what? Again, not rejecting the people we love, especially with this. It's renouncing being attached to the people that we love and being attached to gain. So here, desire for gain, to be attached to, and this idea that I always have to win, I always have to gain. It says, give up these two. The prudent should conduct themselves in this way. The careful ones should really conduct themselves in this way. So here also it means, don't force this, right? Don't force this renunciation. Then it becomes very oppressive. It has to be arising from us understanding the dangers and therefore now deciding to be prudent, to be careful. So, verse 4, penetrative insight, vipassana, join with calm abiding. And this is what utterly eradicates the afflicted states. And so these two qualities of the mind is what finally removes the mental defilements, which then lead us to the state of being awake. So knowing this, he says, first we have to search for calm abiding. We have to find ways for the mind to settle into a state of abiding calmly. Now, where does this come from? Calm abiding? There you go, right? The fourth line. Found by people who are happy to be free from worldly ties. That's the contentment I was talking about. Even in this, in the specific or limited context of like, okay, now I'm going to do my practice. Now I'm going to meditate. So you have to develop that contentment that right now, this is good, this is enough. So you have to be happy to be free from worldly ties. If you force yourself to be free from worldly ties, very hard to achieve calm abiding. It's not calm abiding, it's tightness of mind. All you're doing is, right, you're tying yourself up. Many people do this, many people who have meditated many years. What they've done is they have used like meditation practice to tie themselves, very tightly, so that they won't be distracted, so that they won't move. So it has the semblance of being like focus. But this focus is the result of having tied yourself with meditation. This is not samadhi. This is not calm abiding. This is abiding without choice because you've tied yourself up. So not like that. But it has to come from you're happy to be free from the burdens. Again, a reminder, generally, when we read, receive Buddha's teachings, we have to always kind of understand that whatever we're receiving at that moment, it's like one part of this elephant, and we are blind men. We are blind, So whatever we receive is like one part of this elephant that we are sort of feeling. Don't be so quick to say, oh, an elephant is like a tree trunk because we have grasped, one of the legs. And then whether you like tree trunks or not, then you will have a strong reaction to the thought, oh, elephant is like a tree trunk. If you like trees, you're like, oh man, this is so good. But if you have been traumatized by tree trunks, then you'll realize your concept now, oh, elephant is like a tree trunk. I hate it. I don't like elephants, So here, especially again in these 89 verses, some people say, oh, this is anti-body. Oh, this is anti-body. This is anti-family, anti-this, anti-that. It's like, that is when you kind of zoom in and fixate on and not understand how this particular set of instructions work within a broader context. And specifically here, it's really important that our not being attached to these things that keep distracting us is something that arises from seeing and understanding and appreciating the weight of being tied down by samsaric forces, and the weightlessness and the freedom and the benefits of being freed from that. It has to come from there. So in this next section, verse 5 to 16, Shantideva will talk about giving up attachment to beings. And then from 17 to 24, he will talk about giving up attachment to worldly gain. So this attachment to people. So maybe taking the example of Buddha Shakyamuni, in his life. Yeah. So you all heard, about how he grew up privileged. Later tradition says he grew up, in 3 palaces and everything. Father provided everything. Okay, so that he was a prince. But I would say, I think compare the standards of his life, 2,600 years ago. We are now, if you're listening to this teaching, my guess is, our standard now, we are emperors compared to, the kind of pleasures that he had. Of course, in the ancient texts, especially when they exaggerate, they're like, oh, it's so much and so much and so much. But, I mean, let's look at historical records and archaeology. I can say, you and me, if not better than Siddhartha, I think close, So don't just think, oh, well, I've never been a king before, or I've never been a prince before. How do I know that living like a prince is not what ultimately brings happiness? All of us are prince and princesses, kings and queens in our palaces, right? That we have. Yeah. So Siddhartha grew up like that, and also protected from seeing the realities of life. So he grew up like that. Yes, so then, at the age of 19, he married this wife that by all accounts, it was a very loving marriage. Yes, arranged and everything, but he was married. And they remained married for 10 years. Because at the age of 29, and then over the years, things began to build, and he began to have more and more an awareness of the realities of samsara. And it said that finally, when he went outside his palace, right? How many of us have actually gone outside of our palaces? We have to ask that question. Because sometimes we listen to, or we read Siddhartha's story, we think, oh, what a sheltered life. We forget how sheltered we are. We forget how sheltered we are. We think, well, so we walk around thinking, oh no, I'm not sheltered. But in fact, I mean, if you really think about the story, right? Was Siddhartha so dumb? It says that, oh, he never saw aging. He never saw anyone would have seen like you and me would have seen, but not really see, right? Not really see old age, sickness, and death. So we are all walking around still protected by our Father, Shuddhodana, from seeing reality. But it says that finally he saw. When he saw that, he said, I cannot stay here. I have to go. And this happened right when his son, his first son, was born. Right when his son was born, which is the happiest time, especially being in the royal context. Now he has an heir. His throne is secure now, all of that. Like it seems like everything has fallen into place to be so good for him now. But his understanding that, no, this is not it, led him to make the decision to leave. And it is said that when he was leaving, the last thing he did was he went to see his sleeping wife and son. And then some people, again, misunderstand and say, oh, that is so cruel, so irresponsible. He left his, new child and wife, and, but it says in the sources, he said, I really have to go because staying here, I cannot help you. How can I help either of you from the sufferings of old age, sickness, and death? Because if I stay here, I'll just be exactly in the same boat as you. I need to go find an answer. I need to free you, free both of you from the sufferings of old age, sickness, and death, and the sufferings of samsara. So with the heaviest of hearts, with regards to how he loved them, he left. So this is what we're talking about when we talk about renunciation. Not a heartless, irresponsible, like, oh, I don't love you anymore. No, not that. But you begin to see and understand that if I remain like everybody else here, who is being helped? Nobody. Not myself, not the people I love. So this example of Siddhartha, we have to look more carefully. So Siddhartha cut his attachment to his wife, his son, his father, the mother who raised him, which is actually his birth mother's sister. So he cut his attachment to them out of his love for them. And so this is how, we can understand, right? Like, what are we talking about, when we say, when it says here, abandon, give up attachment to beings. It's not, discarding them like they are a burden. It actually comes from, especially in the Mahayana tradition, comes from love and compassion. So we cannot just use our mouth and talk about this, blah, 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 blah. Some of us are using Dharma to get away from our family. Especially in the West, it's more likely to happen, We're using Dharma to get away from our family. Then we don't get along, with the family. We say, see, Dharma says I should not be attached to them. This is misusing Dharma. Misunderstanding Dharma, misusing Dharma, Yeah, so especially in the West, especially younger people, where your parents is just learning how to, let you be a grown up, especially in the West, the way to do this, and the way to practice love, to practice being not attached, has to be a little different. It cannot be to antagonize them with your Dharma activities. Maybe that's not your intention, but sometimes if you do your Dharma practice in such a way to antagonize them, that's not really helping either. Okay? So you need to be sensitive to how they are feeling about your Dharma practice. So in the West, I always say, don't let your commitment to the Dharma be someone else's problem. Remember that principle. But then also remember what we're going to be learning from Shantideva on the need to work on freeing ourselves from distractions. So you have to balance those both sides. Otherwise, your family and friends will resent the Dharma. Of course, in Asia, And maybe there's also resentment, because if you become more and more focused in your Dharma practice, then you cannot hang out with them. You cannot, do all the things that they want you to do with them. They still probably resent, but because culturally it's different in Asia, that resentment won't become too harmful. Eventually, when they see that you are serious, usually in Asia, they will let you go. They say, okay, yes, this is what you have chosen. But in the West, this is so culturally different. They think you are stuck in a cult, Then you cut off their potential attraction to the Dharma. So you have to tread more carefully in the West. So, for example, if your family is religious, oh, actually, now that you are, into the Dharma, you should go with them, to church. Because for us, it's not what we externally do that matters. And it's not deception if you go with them to church now. It makes them happy. You're doing this as an offering. Because what they fear most is, again, that they have lost you to some cult, to some mind-controlling group or some extreme group. That's their fear. So you reassure them, no, I'm just starting to figure out how to be a better person with Dharma practice. Yes, Judy.
I've been thinking about this word attachment, and I have a little bit of trouble with it because I think it's hard to...
Entanglement.
That's I think a better... Enmeshment is also a word. It's the
yes.
The ickiness, that grasping.
Mm-hmm.
results in
Yes.
relationships. And so I think entanglements is an easier word to understand, because we're naturally attached to people we love. It's, at least that's the way I think of that term.
Yes, yes, yes. I've mentioned this many times now, but all the books use attachment, so we're stuck with it.
Okay, well.
That's why I continue to have business, because I'm trying to get people to
clarify. Yeah, the nuances are very important in all of this. Thank you.
Thank you. This is a translation issue, so I don't know if in the Chinese and Spanish. If you, yeah, right. So just explain to them. Don't worry about it. This is an English translation issue, which is crucial for those of us who are learning Dharma in English now. Yeah, like in development psychology, you know, like it's really important for a child to have healthy attachment. And so, again, young people, if you are going to have kids, don't misuse Dharma. Oh, you need to be detached. There has to be healthy attachment to the parents. In fact, one time His Holiness, one year when he was teaching in the US, he was emphasizing this point, and because he was also talking to young Tibetans who have settled in the West, yeah, he said, His Holiness said, I really admire, you know, how in the West parents teach their children to be independent and give them the independence to really develop. He said that first. Then he said, but then secondly, he said, but as you are now here doing this, also don't forget that there are things in our way that is also important. And he says, for example, he says, in the old days, a child is physically in contact a lot with the mother. And he says, well, these days, mother or father, doesn't matter. Both even better. But just the way Tibetan society is like, so the child is, you know, on the mother. And so he says that kind of physical contact, especially when the child is not cognitively completely kind of developed yet, but that kind of physical closeness to the body, body touching body, he says, gives confidence to the child, security to the child. And he says, don't forget that and say, oh, independence, independence, independence. He says, that's really important. He says, first you give them that, then you teach them how to be independent. And he says, and that we are very bad in Asia, he says. It is children that are 20, 30, you know, still have no sense of independence. So let's take a short break and then we will resume.
Om Wage Jware Mum Wage Jware Mum Om Wage Jware Mum Wage Jware Mum Om Wage Jware Mum Wage Jware Mum Om Wage Jware Mum Wage Jware 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 Om Wage Jware Mum wage joare mum, 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 wage joare mum.
Okay, we're back. So now let's read verse 5 to 16. That section on giving up attachment to beings. Beings brief, ephemeral, who strongly cling to what is also transient, will catch no glimpse of those they love for many thousands of their future lives. Not seeing them, their minds will have no joy. They therefore will not rest in equanimity. But even if they see them, they are not content, and as before, the pain of longing stays. If I crave for other beings, a veil is cast upon the perfect truth. Wholesome disillusion melts away, and finally there comes the sting of pain. My thoughts are all for them, and thus my life is frittered by. My family and friends all change and pass, for whom the changeless Dharma is cast out. For if I act like childish beings, sure it is that I shall fall to evil destinies. So why do I keep company with infants who lead me to a state so far from virtue? One moment friends, the next their bitter enemies. Even pleasant things arouse their discontent. Ordinary people, it is hard to please them. A beneficial word, and they resent it, turning me instead from what is good. And when I close my ears to what they say, their anger makes them fall to lower states. Jealous of superiors, they vie with equals. Proud to those below, they strut when praised. Say something untoward, they seethe with rage. What good was ever had from childish folk? Keep company with them, and what will follow? Self-aggrandizement and scorn for others. Talk about the good things of samsara. Every kind of vice is sure to come. Only ruin can result from such a link between myself and others, for they will bring no benefit to me, and I, in turn, can do them nothing good. Therefore, flee the company of childish beings. Greet them when you meet with smiles that keep on terms of common courtesy without inviting intimate relations. Like bees that get their honey from the flowers, take only what will serve the practice of the Dharma. Treat everyone like new acquaintances and keep yourself from close familiarity. As I say, these are not necessarily words we like to hear, but let's go through and see what they can say to us. So the first part emphasizes how those that we really feel like, I really care about, I love them, I really care about them. And so there he says, with regards to them, understand that whatever time you can even spend, like now, right now, even if it is 24/7, it just passes like that. And then what? Yeah. And then, of course, now, in the last year to two with the pandemic, you're like, oh, spending too much time together. Maybe 24/7 is not such a good idea. So verse 5, it says, beings brief and ephemeral. So all of us. And if we strongly cling to what is also brief and ephemeral, then what is the result? The result is of the brief time that we have here. That's it. So implied in this is actually there's another way, where we can be connected for thousands of lifetimes, but in a skillful way, in a way that actually lifts each other more and more out of a state of confusion in the state of clarity and liberation and freedom. So verse 6 says, not seeing them, our minds will have no joy. And so we cannot rest in equanimity. We cannot rest satisfied. And then if we see them, after a while, we become discontented. The pandemic situation, seeing too much, Then, as before, the pain that comes from longing comes. Whether you don't see them or you see them. This is just how it often becomes. And all of this, whether seeing or not seeing, what is the common factor here is lacking clarity. Lacking understanding of the deeper truth of who we are, what we are, how we can more skillfully be with each other. Is when that is lost, then all we experience is the pain that comes from being entangled with each other. So 7 says, if I crave for other beings, then what happens is a veil is cast upon the perfect truth. Perfect truth means, the way things are. So when I crave, right? Usually when you crave something, whatever it is, it's not actually the thing now you are craving. Now you have distorted what is. It's often an exaggeration that we are now craving. And since what we are now craving is no longer what we think we want, therefore it can never bring the satisfaction we're looking for, So this line, and so when a veil is cast over the situation, then wholesome disillusion melts away. In my translation, it says wholesome disillusion. What it's talking about is, I don't know, this word wholesome is a little, I think of, I somehow, when I see the word wholesome, I think of, healthy cereal. Healthy cereal with no sugar. I don't know why, Anyway, the wholesome disillusion here is talking about our ability to recognize like the faults of samsara and therefore go, "Oi, yikes," that goes away.
Sorry, Dr. Lai, I missed that. Can you repeat again?
You have to
Just
tell me again what you heard, then I can tell you what you did not hear.
When the view is cast away, wholesome something?
Okay, so when the veil, right, is cast upon the truth, that means covers the truth of the situation, right? Then wholesome disillusion, which means, seeing samsara and its faults and therefore going, I'm done with that. That goes away when we don't see the truth of the situation. And we don't see the truth of the situation because we are craving after an exaggeration of what we think we want or who we think we want. And because of that, the last line, the sting of pain comes again. My thoughts are all for them, and thus my life is frittered by. So that you become then obsessed with them. What is this them, you know? Again, it's not the object, the original object, so to say, that you think you care about, you think you love. It's the object covered with the veil, the exaggerated. Yeah. So your thoughts are always just after that. But my family and friends all change and pass. And here, you know, like on the surface, it sounds like it's the usual way we think about change and impermanence. Oh, they will change, they will pass, then they will be gone. Yes, of course, it has that meaning, but you can also understand this as saying, they ultimately who we love and who we are attached to, and more to the point, who we are attached to, it's a frozen exaggeration that we are attached to. The actual original object or person that you have a fondness for, that you care about, that person, that family, that relative, that friend, they are continually different, changing, right? Sometimes you could say growing, sometimes regressing, you know, but whatever it is, they are constantly changing. So in fact, the object of our love and care doesn't remain unchanging for you to love and care about. And if you don't see that, then all your supposed love and care becomes part of the confusion. Yeah, so verse 8 can be read as, because we don't fully, clearly see the unstable, changing nature of who we love, who we care about. Therefore, we give up the changeless Dharma. What is the changeless Dharma? Okay, don't imagine it as something permanent sitting over there. Oh, that you have given that up. It's actually the changeless Dharma is the Dharma that points out that everything is changing and in constant flux, unstable, unreliable. Now, don't get into all this wordplay, but then isn't that changing, unchanging? These are games that, mental games that undergraduates play, in the classes that I used to teach. Then from 9 to 14, Shantideva slightly shifts in his kind of arguments, goes in a slightly, different direction now. Here from 9 to 14, he's going to point out how the so-called friends that you have, the so-called objects of your love, they can bring you so much trouble. His goal is not for you to judge other people, for you to have a superiority complex. His goal is not for you, to kind of blame other people and say, oh, you're unreliable, you betray me, blah, blah, blah. No, that's not the goal, okay? He's just bringing out things that we often cover over because we have exaggerated how great and how wonderful this relationship is and not see, especially that in many ways, again, not saying that these people are evil, no, but because they are in a state of confusion themselves, and we are trying to get out of confusion, or supposedly we say we want to get out of this confusion, then when we relate with them, we got to be careful not to get sucked into that kind of confusion. So the 9 to 14, they are called childish beings, immature, meaning spiritually uninformed. So to use the image of like infants and children, is to emphasize how you can't help it. Like children, like infants, they can't help it. They're not, again, like, right, developmentally, right? Even from the perspective of development biology, right? Like we say, the brains are not fully formed yet, So in a way, it's not their fault. It's just the situation of samsara that, And so as bodhisattvas, we say, I should not. I should know better, right? I should not. So it says, for if I act like childish beings, surely it is that I shall fall into the evil destinies. So why do I keep company with infants who lead me to a state so far from virtue? What leads me? My getting entangled in those situations leads me to a state that is far from virtue. Again, Shantideva is not blaming the childish beings. He is here pointing out the disadvantages of us getting sucked into samsaric drama, not dharma, samsaric drama. So in the 10, 11, 12, he gives you scenarios that we have run into, all the time. Yeah. One moment, friends, the next, bitter enemies. Like people who are madly in love with each other. Next moment could be 10 years later, right? You are trying to kill each other. Or you are going to the court to sue each other. Very strange, Is that, so then when you look back and you say, those 10 years, is that love? What is that? How can you love someone so much and then suddenly, maybe not suddenly, but then 10 years later, all you can think of is how to destroy them. So what is the nature of those experiences? Yeah? Even pleasant things arouse their discontent. Ordinary people, it is hard to please them. Ordinary means mundane, those who have not cultivated their minds. Like verse 11, it says, so even, sometimes you say a beneficial word, but they resent it. And because of that, you also think, oh, from now on, I'm not going to help to say. So you turn away from the good because of that experience. And when I close my ears to what they say, and then when you don't pay attention to them, then they become angry. And that anger will lead them to the lower realms, so to say. You don't have to take it so literally, but that anger destroys their happiness. So then your happiness is destroyed, their happiness is destroyed. Then 12, this 12, it describes how we often are, we're jealous of those whom we think is better than us. Then those whom we think we're equal with, we compete with them. Then those whom we think are not as good as us, we're proud. We look down on them. And then when people praise, we strut around. And then when people say something that is not flattering to us, we seethe in rage and anger. This is the childish ways. So he's saying here, when we get involved like this, we be turned into helplessly childish, and then others are also helplessly childish. So he says in 13, why keep this kind of company? And even when things are going well, when you are together, like, oh, talk about the good things in samsara, often that also leads to negativity. So here, right, it says, in this way of being related to others, only ruin can result between you and others. And so he's saying, don't form these kinds of relationships. Don't encourage, don't stay in this kind of relationships. This kind of being connected to the world. Now, don't read this section as Shantideva saying either of these two. One, don't think, Shantideva is saying all your relationships are like this. He's not saying that. He's saying that this particular kind of being related to others, it just brings ruin to everyone. So renounce that. That's what he is saying. Then secondly, in case it's not obvious, he's not saying you should do, he is not prescribing you to go around seeing how all your relationships are like this. He's not saying that. He's saying with regards to the company of such childish people. So verse 15, he says, then in fact, if you see that whoever it is that you're relating to, connected to, falls under this kind of mutually destructive, and not even because somebody is up to no good. Here is not even talking about people who intentionally want to cause harm. He's just saying that there are situations where because of mutual ignorance, mutually childish, right? Then renounce that. Then he says, when you meet with these people, then, verse 15, greet them with smiles that keep on terms of common courtesy without inviting intimate connections. So this is a skillful way. Not being two-faced, not being like hypocritical, but really understanding like when we get together, we get into these childish ways that bring about the ruin and the suffering of both you and me. So best we not do that. Then we can just stay on the common courtesy level. He says, treat everyone like new acquaintances and keep yourself from close familiarity, right? So these two lines, you should then remember also the English, we have a saying in English, familiarity breeds contempt. So here is the opposite of that. So he's saying, so in a way, immediately when you read those two lines, at least the way it's translated into English, it might sound kind of cold, But here I think we can read it as, like with acquaintances, we are often we don't take for granted, when we relate to acquaintances as well. We kept a friendly demeanor, but we don't get into like, I expect this, you expect that, all of that. Yeah, so here acquaintances doesn't have to mean. What is implied in close familiarity here is the kind of close familiarity that brings suffering for everyone. Then here, acquaintances, new acquaintances, the word new there, new acquaintances, there's a freshness, You don't have expectations. You don't put burdens on each other. And this reading is consistent with the example given. He says, like bees who visit the flowers, they take the honey, they take the nectar to make honey without harming the flowers. That's crucial to understand. Yeah, because this verse 16 summarized the whole section about how we should relate to others. Like a bee that knows how to extract nectar from the flowers without harming the flowers. That is how we should relate with others in this world. Yeah, so today we will stop here. An announcement about timing of our class starting from next Tuesday. This Saturday, everything is still the same. For next Tuesday onwards, those of you who are in Asia, nothing changes. For you, it's still going to be, if you're in Malaysia and Singapore, 9 to 11 p.m. Okay? So Asia, don't worry about it. But for those of us in the West, in the Americas, we will change our meeting time to 1 hour earlier. So New York time, it will be 8 to 10 instead of 9 to 11. Then the rest of you in different time zones, Google, New York time, 8 a.m., local time, ? That's how you should ask Google. Many, but not all countries in the Americas do this, and in Europe too, do this daylight savings business. 1 hour faster, 1 hour slower. So in the fall, we fall back an hour. So Anyway, starting from next Tuesday, we will start at 8 New York time. But again, in Asia, don't worry about it. Your time is same. Don't get confused. Changju Samcho Rinpoche Ma Ge Ba Nam Ge Yu Chi Ge Ba Nyam Ba Me Ba Yang Go Ne Gong Du Pel War Shou. I got the keys to the new Urban Dharma space yesterday, and so lots of work, lots of excitement coming up. We'll give you updates from time to time, and then also appeals for help for us to make this move smoothly, and soon we'll have a brand new nice space. Bye-bye. Ta-ta.
Gracias.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Gracias.
Congratulations.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Good morning.
Thank you, Dr. Lai.
Thank you.
Dr. Lee.
Gracias.